A forest may seem familiar and trivial only at first glance, but the moment you look at what is happening under the canopy, and you become convinced that what you see is beyond our understanding of a forest, you finally realize that it is a complex and incomprehensible organism. How do countless inhabitants really coexist here? How are our forests really arranged? Forests of the Pypyat Stokhid National Park. Are they the creation of nature or the fruits of human labor, which have very little in common with wild terrains? After the summer rains, a rainbow hangs over the Pypyat River, appearing in the serene air. Lone boats drift slowly down the river. There is a mirror-like surface and serene silence around. It is an intact nature 6 kilometers from the Belarusian border. The village of Svalovychi is as if lost among the majestic Polissian forests and bogs. Old, slightly crooked, wooden thatched houses emphasize the authenticity of these places. Time has no power over them, just the same as over the nature that surrounds them. This is the carefully preserved fiefdom of the Pypyat Stokhid National Park. The Svalovychi village isn't very populated. There are no more than 15 inhabited yards. Just as hundreds of years ago, the locals speak their own Polissian dialect and use a traditional wooden well crane to lift up water to the surface from the well. Then they go to the bog especially to pick cranberries and cowberries, and then they go to the local forest to pick blueberries and mushrooms. As usual, the protected area is located far from civilization. A dirt road leads to the village, though it is much safer to get here by water. It is exactly here that the Stokhid River flows into the Pypyat River. The waterway collects hundreds of intertwined water arteries, creating ornate patterns. The river surface is decorated with yellow water lilies, graceful arrowheads, and is surrounded by cattails and reeds. The floodplains of the Pypyat and Stokhid rivers offer fantastic views of vast and spacious meadows with lowland swamps and oak and pine forests. We're in one of the richest areas of a mature moss pine forest. In fact, it has been protected for almost 40 years. Once there was a protected area, and now it is a part of the territory of a national park. So what is its value? Not a single tree has been cut down on this site for 40 years. In addition to wetlands, slightly less than half of the park is covered with indigenous forests. This is an area of unique plantings, very few of which remain today on our planet. Do you see this pine tree? It's an adult tree, and this is the second tier, where an ordinary oak tree has already grown. Such a small one yet, you can even count how old it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tiers. That means that it is somewhere about 11 or 12 years old. The younger generation, called the undergrowth, is a shift for aging, enduring trees. The undergrowth appears only where there are favorable climatic conditions. The richer the soil and the greater the shining of light through the canopy, the faster and stronger the young trees grow. True, it would have been tough for the undergrowth to grow without an understory, namely dense shrubs that help the third stage of forest growth. The richer the undergrowth develops, the more it obscures the soil and prevents it from grassy vegetation. So in this natural process, young trees get more nutrients and moisture and live longer. This forest is about 90 to 110 years old. The average age is about 100 years. This is the first tier, and the undergrowth is younger than 20 years. Different tiers indicate that this is a natural, alive forest that contributes to the concentration of biodiversity. bird's chirping adds a special spirit and aura to the life of the forest. Wryneck is a bird of the woodpecker family that has a motley masking color. It is barely noticeable, but recognizable by the trills. In contrast to relatives who most often remain in their native lands, the wryneck migrates far to Africa for the winter. It is not typical for this bird to build a nest, contrary to other woodpeckers, which are masters of this work. Their beak doesn't allow them to gouge holes in the trunk. Therefore, the wryneck incubates offspring in the hollows of other species of birds. We managed to catch these birds and make banding several times. When you take a little wryneck in your hand, it pretends to be dead. It twists its head in a funny way and then flips backward. It is a very sly bird. This bird's diet mostly consists of small ants, aphids, caterpillars, and for a more balanced diet, it gladly eats plant food. Usually obsessed with bright fruits, the wryneck most likely won't pay attention to a blueberry, although the summer is the best time for picking this forest berry. A little bit later, a cowberry will give its fruits. Fragrant Labrador tea leaves, wood sorrels, and other herbs and mosses will neighbor with them as well. This vegetation occupies the lower floor of the forest, where there are generally shady and humid places. Bracken, one of the fern genera, is also not a huge fan of light, so it is content with poor sandy soil. Its coppices rise on the bank of the river. Long before dinosaurs roamed the planet, ferns were as tall as trees, and now they grow in their shadows. But a fern is very tenacious to life and is not afraid to be broken, burned, or trampled. Its shoots appear where the grass does not grow, on cuttings, burns, abandoned fields, or argil soil. This is ordinary bracken, a genus of ferns. It grows on the territory of mixed forest in the park. It may grow up to a meter in height or even taller, depending on the surrounding environmental conditions. By the way, scientists note that some conditions of the environment, particularly terrain features, are encoded in the names of areas given by our ancestors. If you see on the map Horky, Rady, Komki, all words describing heights in Ukrainian, then be sure that you will find a high ground. And in Yamki, dimples, you will find lowlands. The most probable places of forest of a specific type or plant species can also be guessed by the names of the areas.
Відображають місце зростання певних видів рослин.
After the name of specific species which were growing on these territories or forests, dubki, oaks, beer, pine copse, khmeli, hops, and chaplishchi, heron's breeding area, or shershny, hornets, might prove to be of interest for entomologists. Совині гнізда, owl's nests, were initially found by locals.
Дало назву урочищу по місцезнаходженню совиних гнізд.
After analyzing 364 names of areas, it turned out that they could be useful in the search for red list species. So in the area of Kapustina Hora, Cabbage Mountain, botanists found a rare Jovibarba globifera species. Jovibarba is known as hare's cabbage among Slavic peoples. Sand dunes are a favorable habitat for Jovibarba. Here one of the plants has sent out a pedicel, which will begin blooming soon. Such sandy dunes can be seen on the banks of the Styr River, a tributary of the Pypyat River. There are islands of deserts with dunes that appear unexpectedly among the lush greenery. Basically, this is a feature of the Polissia regional landscape. Sand dunes rising among the bogs of prehistoric origin. They were formed during the glacial era. In summer, the dunes are covered with bright and fragrant thyme. It is also called creeping thyme, an irreplaceable component in cooking. Closer to the river, the emerald carpet is becoming diverse, eye-catching, densely growing small leaves in the form of a penny. Here are the roots of its name, a water pennywort. While not a rare find for local places, in the broader scale, it's a disappearing species listed in the Red Book of Extinction. Among the plants of the ground floor of the national park, Allinia borealis is the most valuable. The creeping bush creates some kind of open-work carpets. On the territory of Ukraine, it can be found in only two places, the Carpathian Mountains and Polissia. The largest population of this herb is in these forests. The study and preservation of Allinia borealis became the occasion for well-known botanists to visit Pypyat Stokhid. We're on the permanent sample area of Linia borealis, which is listed to the Red Book of Extinction of Ukraine. Our park is basically the second place of its growth, is precisely what makes this place unique. This evergreen liana waves constantly. You see how it twists around the roots while growing upwards above the ground. If linia is an indicator of a shady and dense forest, then mosses appear where there is also dampness. The dense sponge of moss impedes the evaporation of moisture, sometimes so intensively so that the genesis of bog soil begins, thus impairing the growth of trees. When mosses wither, lichens appear on tree trunks instead. Roots covered with moss experience oxygen starvation, so trees are gradually dying. And dead trees contribute to the forest life, forming a food resource for insects and giving them shelter. In such places, it is possible to find large beetles, for example, a ground beetle, especially in summer, when it experiences a period of increased activity. This is the most numerous insect by species, up to 25,000, which starves for protection. For example, one of the inhabitants of the Pypyat Stokhid Park is the ground beetle Carabus clathratus, classified as a rare species. It is found as a rule near reservoirs and loves moisture. In places where wet forest passes into a bog, a ledum palustre can often be found. This shrub, known also as wild rosemary, has a strong, suffocating, resinous smell. Ledum palustre is indicating the transition from a wet forest to the bog. Over there, the wild rosemary grows almost on the edge, and further into bog, it is hard to find the wild rosemary. But there is a cotton sedge, an indicator of the so-called saucer bogs, but the main inhabitant of the wetland is sphagnum moss. Sphagnum can accumulate large quantities of water, contributing to the rapid development of bogs. Since ancient times, sphagnum mosses have been used as a material for bandages, providing a germicidal effect. Soft to the touch, they may easily replace rollers and cotton. As a rule, mosses stimulate the genesis of bogs in lakes and floodplains of rivers. Here, a sponge of sphagnum moss covers a forest saucer bog isolated from water bodies. It is formed as a result of geological processes. It is lowland surrounded by higher ground, so it looks like a saucer from above. The middle of summer is the most arid time, when the groundwater level drops significantly, and then a bog comes to help the forest, giving moisture that nourishes trees and plants. The bog will be able to restore its water storage only during the precipitation period. That's the way it has always been. If the age-old oaks preserved in the park could speak, they probably would have shared their memories. The park appeared much earlier because there was a forest here. It was a forest where mainly oak trees grew. The lower tier was occupied by hornbeam and other forest vegetation. And in the 18th century, the Charnetsky Castle was built. The site became a part of the castle area. It was accordingly arranged, thinned, and new types of trees and plants were planted. Out of the forest pot, a refined natural oasis was created. Alleys were built and bushes were thinned. This corner allowed citizens to relax, to get closer to nature, feed wild ducks, walk to the outskirts of the park and the Stokhid River, and feel the energy of the trees while walking along the forest alleys. It is believed that oaks give strength to people, although not all oaks have such a huge reserve of this energy to share it. There are experts who can determine this, as it was in our region. Among all the longlivers growing in the park, they pointed out this giant tree as a true source of natural energy. And the settlement Lubeshev, located in Volhynia and Polissia, is an eyewitness to this history. It has been a little more than 500 years since the oak tree had been mentioned the first time, and the preserved architectural sites open the pages of the history of the city Lubeshev, which was 3 centuries old at that time. The entrance gate is the only remaining part of the palace residence of the owner of the city, Jan Charnetsky. The ancient Baroque site is an echo of the 18th century, as well as the building of the collegiate Collegium of the Order of Piarists, the building of one of the first schools in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Piarists are a Catholic order which, among other things, made a vow to give the pious teaching for children. The construction of the Church of the Piarists was never completed, but the temple of the Roman Catholic order of the Capuchins survived. Its strict architectural forms closely echo the ascetic way of life of members of the monastic order and fit naturally into the landscape of the Pypyat Stokhid National Park. Here, natural and historical monuments are densely linked and hold many secrets. So come travel with us and discover the interesting and amazing unexplored historic, architectural and natural gems of Ukraine.